The book says that Jesus was moved by their faith. And he said, not to them, but to him, friend, your sins are forgiven. Now, if you think about it, I know you've been in church and you've been reading this text, but come on, think about it. Put on your common sense helmet rather than, what people expect you to think in church. You know that statement doesn't make any sense. That's a rather strange statement. The brother didn't come looking for forgiveness. He came looking for healing. Yet Jesus says your sins are forgiven. What's that all about? Well, the best critical commentaries point out that in the mindset of the ancients, if one had a serious illness, often it was assumed that sin was the cause. And so he says your sins are forgiven. That's one way of thinking about it. But I would submit that Jesus is getting at something else here. Long before Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, Jesus understood the psychology of a guilt-ridden personality. Jesus understood what happens when a society constantly blames the victim. Jesus understands what happens when you've been so victimized that you start calling yourself by the names that the other folk used to call you. Jesus understood what happens when you internalize stigma. The man was paralyzed by what he had internalized. And it weighed on his spirit. And all he needed was somebody to tell him, brother, you're free. You're a child of the living God. I don't care what they said about you. I don't care how much they've tried to marginalize you. You are a child of the living God. And once you know who you are, once you know whose you are, walking is easy. We shout when Jesus said, take up your bed and walk. But I'm telling you, the brother was healed when Jesus said, your sins are forgiven. Because once you know who you are and whose you are, you can get up from your bed of affliction and know that you are a child of the living God.
One day Jesus was teaching, and Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there. They had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was with Jesus to heal the sick. Some men came, carrying a paralyzed man on a mat, and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and lowered him on his mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd right in front of Jesus. When Jesus saw their faith, he said, friend, your sins are forgiven. The Pharisees and teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone? Jesus knew what they were thinking and asked, why are you thinking these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up and walk? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So he said to the paralyzed man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. Immediately he stood up in front of them, took what he had been lying on, and went home, praising God. Everyone was amazed and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, we have seen remarkable things today.